Hi, everyone. Welcome to the comment section on HAPS TV. I'm your host, Shivani Prasad, and today we're speaking with Kavita Rai, an activist, journalist, and founder of Justice in the Classroom, a student-powered organization focused on mobilizing all education stakeholders to prioritize racial equity in public schools across Southern California. Kavita was a former teen advisor for the UN's Girl Up initiative and remains a fierce advocate for global gender equality, now serving on the Female Quotient's inaugural Next Gen Board of Advisors. Today, we'll be speaking with Kavita about her coverage of the current farmers' protests in India. We'll be giving a brief history of the protests, going through what's happening right now, and reviewing a few comments about the protests together. So all that and more today. Thanks for joining us on the comment section. If you can hear me, can you let me know in the comments? I've noticed that on my end, at least, some of the videos that I'm playing, I'm not hearing their audio for whatever reason. So if you can hear it, let me know. All that matters is if you can hear it. All right. So as I said today, we're going to be talking about the farmers' protests in India with Kavita Rai. So let me give you a little bit of a background on what's happening. So the Indian government has passed 3 pieces of legislation that will significantly affect crop prices and generate a massive loss of income for farmers in India. Over 250 million farmers are protesting this legislation, which is the largest peaceful protest in human history. And although they are protesting peacefully, they're being met with violence and violence from law enforcement, such as tear gas and water cannons. These peaceful protesters are also being labeled terrorists by the Indian media. So without consulting any farmers, the Indian government passed this legislation that effectively deregulates the agriculture sector in India. For example, these laws eliminate all government subsidies, effectively forcing farmers to go into contracts with corporations and get exploited. Another law also prevents farmers from being able to go to court if they get into a dispute with a big corporation. Kavita is going to go into more detail about this, but before that, I just want to go through some of the comments that we found. So Kavita and I found these comments underneath a video explainer that was actually a really good and effective video explainer about what's going on right now in India. So this first one right here says the Indian media did the same negative reporting when Muslims protested against the CAA and they were called anti-nationalists and terrorists. And now the same thing is happening to farmers. When will India see the truth about Modi? What an evil, wild man he is. But he has all the social media and Bollywood and news channels showing him as India's hero. People need to open their eyes before it's too late. The other comment that we found says, this person was commenting on the person who put up the video explainer, saying, you don't even know 1% of this stuff. You need to do some proper research. I live in Delhi, and the things that you said aren't even 30% correct. For your information, no army personnel has been deployed till today. It's just the local police, and that's it. And just 1 farmer has died, not 4. How you describe the laws is totally wrong. The government and farmers have already got into a lot of discussions, which are still going on. So it's my kind request to you that if you don't know the correct thing, then don't create propaganda. So we have Kavita Rai here to talk about this. I'm just going to pop her into the discussion and we'll get started. Hi, Kavita.
Hi, thank you so much again for having me. It's such a pleasure to report on this because right now there is a lack of media circulation around these protests. And so I'm really grateful to just do my part. To kind of get started, I really appreciate your nutshell breakdown of the 3 bills. I think that it perfectly articulates, the breakdown of what exactly is happening. And to kind of respond to a few of the comments more generally about, having to do your research and needing to know what exactly is going on. I think that, it is important to understand that there is validity and argument in why the farmers are protesting. I mean, former chief economist of the World Bank recently said that after studying these bills, he finds them flawed and detrimental to farmers, and in the fact that they will only serve corporate interest rather than the actual farmers. And I wrote an article about these farmer protests for Brown Girl magazine. And in my own reporting and research for that article, all of them led to the same, common theme of this idea that, if you privatize farms, that is going to make farmers more susceptible to corporate exploitation. And to really understand how this happened, and to understand the gravity of these bills, I think it is important to have the context of what farmers were doing prior to these bills. And so farmers sold their produce through an auctioning system known as the Mandi system. And they were able to bargain for their prices through this system. But they were also guaranteed an income through the minimum support price. They had the option of a minimum support price, which is similar to what, a minimum wage rate could be in the UK and US. It was guaranteed income. And farmers understood that the Mandi system needed to be reformed, and Modi's bills are supposedly a response to helping those issues that they have, but we understand that that's not what farmers think, and that although there needs to be reform, the response taken by the government is doing the opposite of helping farmers.
So I just popped this first comment underneath there. So what you just explained to us, what implications does this have for farmers? Because this person is insinuating that it's actually great. It's pretty clear that this person is perhaps watching a lot of Indian media where this is being painted as if it's not detrimental to farmers. So can you explain to us a little bit, what are the implications of this for the farmers?
Yes, there are severe consequences for farmers. If you consider what is happening in the midst of a pandemic, of already growing debt, bankruptcy that farmers were experiencing because of lockdown regulations, and honestly, this agriculture crisis, it's so important to frame this as the tipping point, not necessarily as, they're just starting to protest because of these bills. This is a generational crisis that has been happening. And I'll go a little bit more into that later, but I think it's, this is having a toll on, farmers' mental health. Farmer suicides in the recent years have gone, astronomically high. To give a data point or a statistic, Punjab's government data states that 3,330 farmers have taken their lives due to farmer debt since 2000 till date, of which 698 committed suicide in the past 4 years. And so this, I hope that can narrate the gravity of the situation, is that this is not something that is just happening right now. It has been a systemic crisis that has been happening for generations. And, to really kind of to add to that, this started the privatization of farms in the mid-1960s in Punjab specifically, and why it's so important why so many people are focused on the Punjab region, although this is an Indian farmers movement in general, is because in Punjab in the mid-1960s, there was what is called the Green Revolution, where the Indian government wanted to quote unquote modernize farming. And so they introduced all these different crops that aren't natural to the region's soil. And that has large repercussions on the ecological destruction of land, as well as the overuse of fertilizer and pesticides. And when you're introducing all of these unknown chemicals on soil that can't, in regions that can't sustain that, it has large implications for, not only, the climate crisis and contributing to it, but also it has led to increased rates of diseases for farmers because of this fertilizer overuse and pesticides. They're more susceptible to diseases like cancer. And so this is a very cyclical situation where we see, it is affecting the food system, it is affecting farmers themselves. And so this is really outlining why farmers are mad. It is personal, and it is something that is affecting them in many, many different ways.
Right. And it seems like it's much more of a situation of life and death than people think it is. And so that's why, again, of course, we wanted to talk about it, because we find that it's really not being talked about in mainstream media as much as it should be. To get back to this comment a little bit, though, it's saying that the government and the farmers are in discussion. It's kind of insinuating that there are positive negotiations happening, but we know that that's not necessarily true. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Right. So yeah, there has been discussion that has marked since, early October, when 29 farm unions in Punjab met with the union agriculture secretary. And this is where the farmers first presented their list of demands, which included repealing the 3 farm bills and withdrawing cases against activists and protesters who have spoken out about this. And since then, they've met over 6 times, and we are still seeing farmers mobilizing on and demonstrating peaceful protests. So I wouldn't consider it these peaceful negotiations happening, because the needs of the farmers are not met, and farmers want those 3 bills repealed and won't stop until at least 3 of them are repealed and 2 are withdrawn. And so I think it's really critical for the Indian government to understand their needs. And so I wouldn't consider, because we're still seeing protests happening, we're still seeing activists and farmers speak out. I wouldn't consider this positive negotiations.
Yeah, and it definitely seems as if the farmers are not backing down. They're not saying we are going into this, ready to negotiate and do like a pull and tug and this back and forth. It's no, these laws cannot exist. And I think that's absolutely the right move. The second comment, it's really likening the coverage of the protests to the way that the Indian media covered the CAA protests. It's really calling out the Modi government. And I would love to know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think that, it's evident that the Indian government has consistently shown they are not a government for the people at all. And in the context of the situation, more than half of India's workforce is made up of the agriculture sector, agriculture workers, according to their latest census in 2011. And so this is not just uprooting the entire industry, though. I was on a live with Aditi Mayer yesterday, or a few days ago, and she talked about how this is also, a food systems crisis, right? We all directly benefit from farmers being able to provide us food. And so I think that the Indian government needs to critically think and act in accordance to what the majority of the workforce wants, and how this is going to affect everyone in India who benefits from farmers who feed us, prior to a pandemic, amidst a pandemic, and are doing that, and not just consider what the 1% or corporate interests want.
Right. And I think it's so indicative. I mean, we've seen so much, I think, really great information and guides and like slideshows and presentations on Instagram about how this actually impacts us in these other countries, America, Canada, wherever, more than we think it does. And it really is a global issue. And I think that, if anyone's wondering, I learned a lot by searching the podcast, searching the hashtag, no farmers, no food. There's a lot of really great information there. Actually, I'm going to have Kavita talk about that a little bit as well. What are ways that we can learn more about what's happening with the farmers, or what are ways that we can help support the cause?
Yeah, so there are a few organizations you could even give monetary donations to, such as Khalsa Aid. There's a few, local farm organizations in Punjab specifically, which I've linked all of them in my article for Brown Girl Magazine. But I think even more than monetary donations it definitely support these organizations for sure. But it's also really important to understand what those on the front line need right now and what they're saying, and really listening to those primary sources of those on the front lines, like protesting in Delhi right now and hearing what they need. And what they're saying is that, the media is not covering this. We need to be able to do our part in just, circulating this information and being very accurate in how we circulate that information, meaning like being very making sure that it's credible and reputable sources, so that everyone knows what's happening, and we don't have to sift through comments that are spreading misinformation. And so I think it's really important to just do your part in educating yourself, understanding why this is a crisis, and then doing your part in disseminating that information, because I think it's something that needs to be talked about a lot more, because there's such lack of media attention, and we need to be able to do that to amplify the voices of farmers.
Yeah, and I think something we know is that in a lot of Indian households, even when, maybe the younger generation is showing a lot of what they're learning on social media to their parents, is showing a lot of the correct information to elders in the house. The elders in the house oftentimes are still watching Indian news. They're still taking in so much Indian media. And so I think it's also really important intergenerationally to have these conversations, because there's also so much misinformation really spread in between elders in the Indian community in America and in Canada as well, just through WhatsApp and, sharing all these, incorrect links, and so many, so much Indian essentially propaganda. The wrong type of information is being shared. So like you said, it's not only important, I think, for us to have the correct media coverage, and for people who aren't necessarily Indian to know about it, but also for us to make sure that those in our community who are maybe consuming Indian media or the wrong type of media that's sharing the wrong information, they also need to know what's right as well. So I thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. You did such an amazing job of explaining it. Please stay safe where you are. I know that there might be more lockdowns coming to California and things like that. So I definitely want you to stay safe, and I am so appreciative that you came on the show.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Everyone who's watching, you can find Kavita on Instagram and Twitter at kavita.rai. I'm just going to pop it up really quickly on the screen in case you want to follow her. She does a lot of other awesome work, so definitely give her a like and a follow. And we will hopefully have you back on sometime.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming. Don't forget, you can always send in any comments that you want me to discuss on the show by DMing me on any platform. The comment section will be live. Usually it's live every Saturday at 10 a.m. Today we had to do a little bit of a schedule change, but usually every Saturday at 10 a.m. right here on Happs TV. Thank you so much for joining me from Mississauga, Ontario. I'm Shivani Prasad. Awesome. I think that was great. Thank you so much.